Hello, and welcome back to Rewildology, the show that explores conservation, travel, and rewilding the planet. I'm your host, Brooke Mitchell Norman, conservation biologist and adventure traveler. Take a moment to think of an iconic species found in India. What was the first animal that came to mind? I'm sure some of you saw an image of Asian elephants or spotted deer, maybe even a sloth bear. But if I had to guess, I'm sure the majority of you immediately thought of the most iconic species of all, the tiger. Between the Doubling Tigers Initiative, awareness campaigns, the absolutely crazy Tiger King Netflix show, and this podcast, quite frankly, I'd bet that you have a pretty good grasp on tiger conservation issues. But what about India's big cat that used to live across Africa and Asia? Were you even aware that another big cat, the second largest in the world, is residing in India's wilderness? It's okay if you didn't, because today we are going to learn all about this very rare large carnivore, Asiatic lions. In this episode, I'm chatting with Stotra Chakrabarti, PhD, assistant professor at Macalester College in Minnesota, USA. Stotra's curiosity for the natural world began early in his childhood. Stotra grew up in the Indian foothills of the Himalayas and spent his days watching elephants and leopards and bringing home any injured animal he found, much to his mother's dismay. His interest in wildlife ecology and conservation biology was cemented during a very immersive and rigorous master's training at the Wildlife Institute of India, which he continued onto a PhD by studying the behavior of one of the rarest lions in the world, Asiatic lions. I learned so much in this episode. Stotra shares everything with us: Asian lions' history, the rebound from 50-ish individuals to an estimated 700, the current political stalemate the lions are in, and the big cat that might potentially claim the lion's new protected area. And no, it's not the tiger. If set in motion, this cat would come from many, many miles away. All right, friends, let's dive into everything Asiatic lions. Here is my conversation with Stotra. Hi, Stotra. Thank you so much for coming on today. I'm so excited to get into everything that we're going to talk about because your particular species is one that I know very little about. And I even know a lot about big cats. But yours is very, very unique and very special. But let's go back. Let's dive deep. If you could share with all of us, what is your journey? Where did you grow up? What was a normal day like for young Sutra back where you're from? And just tell us everything. Where are you from? Everything. We would love to hear it.
Thanks, Brooke. First of all, a huge shout out and a big thank you for having me on the show. And it's like I'm like super thrilled. So my story. Well, I grew up in India. So I come from India, and I grew up in one of the northeastern states of India, which is West Bengal. And I grew up in the mountains at the foothills of the Himalayas. So because of my family and my place where I grew up, it was right adjoining tea gardens and the forest, which is basically the Terai. And so I remember very vividly, that's like my oldest vivid memory of my grandmother showing a toddler me. I was like 3 or 4 at that time, showing me elephants in the tea garden that was right adjoining our place. And so I was not associated or accustomed to all the science of corridors and how elephants use these tea gardens for corridors. That came much later, but that was like that memory of wandering in awe, looking at like big, massive herbivores right in front of you, and they're social, they group, and my grandmother explaining me how they live in groups, how they have a matriarch. So my grandmother was very much into natural history, and I think that got me into the path of understanding wildernesses. And I think that started my entire journey of understand or being in love with the wilderness. I definitely did not want to be a wildlife biologist to be in the
Really?
first place. Yes, I wanted to be a soccer player.
Oh,
I
really? You
yeah.
got the
So
hair flow for it.
yeah. So I wanted to be a soccer player for a very long time in my life until I went to college. I wanted to be a soccer player. I played soccer professionally. I I still do once a while, not professionally, but for the fun of it. I love that game. But I always enjoyed animals because I grew up with animals. I had pets, dogs, I had cats, I had and then other things came started coming in. So I had owls that I rescued. I remember my mom and dad always used to fight. Like my dad always have been like, yes, get them, help them, so nurture them. And my mom used to be like, mom is a great supporter, but it's just that, it's like I'm a 5-year-old kid looking at like a big tawny fish owl that's like my size.
She's
Mothers
like
get a bit iffy about things. So yeah, so
understandably.
yeah, like my garage, my power, like back home used to have like owls and squirrel babies and like so I think my mom lost it when I brought in like a tiny infant bat, which like its eyes were closed and it kept chirping, and my mother was like eked out, like my mom was like, no, that's not coming home. So my dad's like, mom said that's not coming home, the garage is not part of the home. And my mom's like, I'm trying to educate our son. And my dad's like, yes, I'm trying to educate. um,
Oh
so
my god, that's hilarious.
so all of that, but with that connection, I think like having animals at home and growing up very near to wildernesses got me like really this bug of whether I took it, I pursued it for my as a profession. That's a different ball game. That's a different story altogether. But I always loved wandering and like moving around in wildernesses, like listening to leaves fall, and that gave me a lot of solace and peace. And always was sort of the weird kid in school trying to get ants and dragonflies and trying to get tadpoles from overrun rivers and streams during the monsoon. So yeah, I think that's all grew up. And then I went to college. Although I wanted to do soccer, I really wanted to play soccer, but then I was like torn between, I was really interested in numbers. I was also really interested in language. So either of the two was like my choice. I could have gone. And then I'm like, you know what? I think my love for animals, and then I read a lot of things associated with adventures in Africa, adventures in parts of India,
Mm.
growing up watching movies. And I think that was it. And I really wanted to be like a who could like, associate and connect to animals and talk to animals per se, Dr. Doolittle. But then I have an entire family of doctors. So there was, although like my entire family is very supportive, they really wanted me to do whatever I wanted to. Perhaps not soccer, but anything else. So when I then moved and I said that, all right, I wanted to be a vet, and my parents were like, okay, but then let's keep it not so focused already. Let's open up to something more general. So I took up zoology in one of the finest colleges back in Kolkata, and it's the Presidency College. I went there, and yeah, I studied zoology. Although I did find a strong disconnect with dissecting cockroaches and frogs to actually trying to understand organismal biology per se. Then went to field trips, and that was fantastic. I went to southern India. I went to Nagarone, and which is
Oh, I've
part
been
of.
there.
Oh, you've been there. Oh,
I've
that's
been
fantastic.
there.
It's a
That was my first
beautiful.
tiger. It was my first
Oh
tiger
wow.
sighting.
Oh
Mhm.
wow. It's like,
Yeah,
and then went to
I cried.
Kabini. I don't. Oh, of course. I don't. I
Tears.
don't. I don't blame you. It's overwhelming.
Yes, it was.
Seeing your first tiger is overwhelming. I totally get it. Yeah. So yeah, it all went through that, and I was like, yeah, I saw my first leopard there. Then went to Kabini, the backwaters, which was fascinating, and it just got me. I look. First for the first time I saw wild dogs, like the dhole, the
Mhm.
Asiatic wild dogs. I was blown out. I'm like, wow. Birds were my main focus. I loved birds because if you love plants and birds, even if you're in a city, you are not really bored, even if you are a naturalist. So like birds and plants, I was like really into. And then and then my trajectory took a different leap altogether because the Wildlife Institute of India, it's like the premier institution in India that does wildlife research. It's the only like federal institution that does wildlife research and training.
Mm.
And they have a master's course, which happens once every 2 years. And acceptance rates are like less than 1%. They just take like 11 students every second year.
Wow.
Yeah, across the country, and there were like 2 students from abroad. And so I think I got lucky. I got a position, like a funded position in that, like,
Wow.
and so and
That's
that
insane.
yeah, I think I was just fortunate to have gotten that. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
Incredible.
So I did that course, and that course, other than the theoretics of it, what was fascinating was that it took us to all the major biomes in the country. So I remember when I first went to the eastern part of India, which is the eastern beach, and where basically the olive ridleys come and nest in mass. And I remember the night when we reached there to look at turtle biology, and with our professors, that night we counted 85,000 turtles. That entire beach, a 1.2 kilometer stretch, that beach was alive. Like
Wow.
like literally it's crawling. It's
Yeah.
dark, it's crawling. Those are like about 150, 200 pound turtles all coming in like waves. And I cried because I was overwhelmed. And I think that changed something in me. And I was like, wow, this is like spectacular is the word. And I was like, God. And so I did that course, and I, and I remember my first tiger sighting was on foot, walking a transect in Panna in central India, where
Really?
I was, yeah, where we were being taught the techniques of wildlife monitoring, from walking transects to putting up camera traps, and like doing pellet counts and everything. And we were walking, and I saw my first tiger, and yeah, I didn't know what to do. Kind of naive, very naive.
I
This
mean,
was
on
way back,
foot, yeah.
yeah, way back in 2011. And yeah, but then went to the mountains, and it was fascinating, not just the animals or the wilderness, but the people associated with it. And I just sort of, I don't know, it just, like, things really changed. So I didn't want to be a naturalist, I didn't want to be a wildlife biologist. I just thought that, well, this profession allows me to be in the wild, which is something that I really adore. Perhaps I could have done other professions that would have led me, but this, I was really like, at that time I was really interested in understanding the patterns and the processes that leads to what we see.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of the backstory that led me to getting into a professional career of doing wildlife science. But I strongly hold that if I do not do field biology, then I don't think I'm doing this profession. Because for me, I have to be out there. Of course, I love the numbers, but I also love the animals, or basically the individuals behind those numbers. Other than that, it doesn't make sense to me.
Mm.
So yeah, so that was my journey till then. And well, the connection with lions came later, and we can talk about that.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
There is one thing that I would love to ask first. Just having spent so much in the Terai, no wonder why you and Sam Helly are tight because duh,
Yeah.
Terai, that's like totally her area too. Um, was there much conflict at all in your village then, like where you grew up? Because it doesn't, when you were telling me that story, I didn't feel much fear or anything. Where was there fear? Was there not? Was it just like you just happened to have family that really understood these animals and did not imprint that fear in you? Or could you dive in that a little bit with me? Because I didn't
Sure.
feel any of that. I mean, someone who lives with elephants and tigers, there would be a natural tendency towards that, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just take a back step and tell you, like, so our place was adjoining, although it's part of the city, but it was like the forest adjoining the tea gardens that are associated with our family, and it's right there connected. But I still remember the first time I saw those first elephants. my grandmother asked me to fold my hands in sort of a ritualistic namaste because elephants are gods for us, right? They epitomize Ganesh, and I think that understanding. It was overwhelming at the time to watch elephants up close and personal, but that connection that people have with animals at the place where I grew up, or at least in the country where I come from, it's just phenomenal. And I
Mm,
think that's where the crux of human wildlife coexistence is in the country that I have significantly worked and I come from, because I'm talking about 1.3 billion people sharing space with wildlife which are dangerous. Like I'm talking
very
about
dangerous.
I'm not talking about jackals or wolves. I'm talking about elephants and tigers and lions and rhinos and leopards in your backyard that can kill, eat, maim you, your livestock, everything, your houses. So I think I was privileged to have had a family which had concrete buildings and concrete settlements, because associated people, their houses were raided by elephants, their
Mm,
crops were raided, but you of course they were angry, of course they were angry, but then the retaliation was in a different form. I think every time you go there, you associate with them, they are like, you know yes, the animals had to do what they had to do. They had to pass. And I think of course, animals die due to retaliation in our country as well. And of course, why not? Because there's too many people. But it's just that the sheer magnitude of tolerance and reverence that people have and that I have seen growing up is difficult to encode with just economics. It's beyond something. And yes, there is. So coming back to your question, there was and is quite a bit of conflict that has been increasing because human wildlife interface is just increasing. But there is a huge amount of tolerance towards wildlife, general wildlife, and towards life per se. And I think it's the major three religions that have come out of our country, like Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism. I think there is a very strong association with, religious and cultural tolerance to all life forms, which has led to this whatever status quo that you're seeing right now. Otherwise, 1.3 billion people, which is ever increasing, and we still have 70% of the global tigers. We have 27,000 Asian elephants, the largest population in the world. We have the largest population of leopards in the world. We're talking about rhinos making a comeback. We're talking about lions making a comeback, and they are like dangerous predators. That would not have been possible if people were not tolerant. Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so I think, yeah, most of my backstory is because I come from that country.
Mm,
So yeah.
that's I could not agree more. And I'm so glad you brought that up simply from me, just loving big cats so much and having looked into the religious conservation relationship as a scientist and just how fascinating it is. I mean, because here in the US, the dominant religion here is Christianity,
Yeah.
and the way that this religion teaches the greater community about how we need to view wildlife is obviously one of the biggest reasons why everything has been so decimated because humans are top.
The
It would
supreme.
probably
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and also too, you look at former religions, like the Native Americans
Yeah.
and their religions, and a lot of the animals that were here that we've been great at extirpating were religious beings, just like, Ganesh. Which goddess is it that rode the tiger? Uh,
Annapurna or Durga.
yeah, yes. Yeah, so exactly. So like you don't kill gods. Like
Yeah.
you don't kill a god. And sometimes I just wonder what the Great Plains would look like if it is what it is. Like, I can't think about that too much because that's not reality. So why
Yeah.
waste brain space on that? But God, sometimes I just think about that. It's like, what if the underlying cultural, I don't know, understandings or view of the world. What if it was different? And how would that look different? Because I mean, the population in the US is nothing like India. And how much more tolerant just the overall community is towards this wildlife, it just baffles me. I mean, it really does. Having been there and also like being in Nepal, very, very similar. People didn't retaliate. I mean, there is a point where like you got to understand, like if, man-eating tiger kills X amount of people, there's only going to be so much tolerance,
Yeah.
100% understandable. But still, like that would never happen in a lot of other cultures. And
Yeah.
so I find it beautiful. I find it so beautiful.
Oh yes, it's overwhelming, and it's also something more like an utopia when I think about it as a conservation scientist. And it's like a fine thread that we are walking. But I think that's the crux of wildlife conservation. One of the major impetus of wildlife conservation in India, and a lot of part in Southeastern Asia. And yeah, I think it's beautiful, and there is a lot to learn from that part of the world. And I just am fascinated with sort of a comparative connection or a comparative account of how cultural tolerances and connections can change the topography of wildlife persistence in the world,
Mhm.
which is, I think, right on our faces, like we are looking at. Yeah. So India as a country has not lost any of its large carnivore except the cheetah, other than and and these carnivores have remained, have persisted, have increased, and these carnivores are at major odds. They are at major odds with people and people's interests, but we still have a rich carnivore assemblage, and they are going up. Well, that's a different story that what we are leading on to, but yeah, I think it's kind of amazing. And when I sit back and think, I think I'm fortunate to be part of that growing up, that upbringing, where socio-religio cultural, that interwoven, and that entire very strong tightly knit connection also includes, very much includes, wildlife and animals as part of the entire process, rather than making them sort of an exclusive affair which needs to be dominated or which needs to be kept away or used per se.
Right.
So
For
yeah,
human use.
yeah. So I guess, as
Ah,
you rightly mentioned, it's like they're gods. We do not harm gods, but tolerance can only be till a limit. And yeah, right.
yeah. Yeah. I just really wanted to ask about that, having spent so much time over there. And I highly recommend anybody listening, if you have not been to that part of the world, you need to go. It is a culture shock. If you are mostly from a Western society, it is, but it is incredible. I mean, I think about it all the time. I want to go back all the time. I just went to Nepal during the pandemic because I wanted to go back, you know? It is incredible, but yeah, just listening to you, that's why I really wanted to ask about it and explore that, cuz any you would have any right, or your family or anybody that would be around you, to have a lot of fear. And I didn't feel any of that. So that's why I was like, tell me why. Why do you think that is? And so, yeah, thanks for exploring that with me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's just growing up. We saw those animals and we didn't find, just you start living with them, and or we just get accustomed to them, and they mind their own business, you mind your own, and you just get to live with them
Yeah.
for, and that's how it is. But
Yeah.
yeah, of
They're your
course,
neighbors.
yeah, of course, the neighbors. And there is a beautiful book. Tigers are associated as brothers, like the hunters that go in because they are subsistence hunting, but they mostly do not kill a tiger because they are indicators of the forest. They need to keep them at the name of a tiger is basically a brother, which is, yeah, superbly interesting how these animals have come into our family lives and part of the household per se. So
Mm,
yeah,
wow. That's wonderful.
yeah,
So let's keep going down your
yeah.
journey here. So, what was next? Okay, so you are in this unbelievable opportunity where only 9 Indians can actually do this and 2, foreign people. That is insane that you were able to land that. So then what happened? Did you study is this when you found lions or was it
Hmm.
after this or what made you decide to study this very particular rare species?
So yeah, that's a fun question because I was not going to study Asian lions. My plan A was to study jackals, which are like basically sort of ecological equivalents of coyotes here, because I was really interested in canids and sociality. And
Mm.
so I thought about a master's thesis work around them. Didn't go through because there were lots of ifs and buts, funding opportunities. Then I thought about working, and then the plan that I went on with, I really wanted to look at physiology, metabolism of like wild felids as a group. And that's where I landed in this special place in Gujarat, which is like northwestern India, and where the Asian lions are found. The global population of Asian lions are restricted to only that state and a park of about 1,800 square kilometers. And so I go there and I wanted to do feeding experiments, cafeteria experiments with wild caught lions, leopards, tigers, jungle cats, and feral cats. So it's like an entire hierarchy of body sizes,
Mhm.
because I wanted to look at physiology, I wanted to look at digestion. I was trying to come up with these optimal foraging models. But for that, I went into and worked in a captive environment in a zoo, and which is like right bordering the the Gir forest ecosystem. So I enjoyed my time in the zoo was eye opening because I was not only working with the animals that I was working with, the fixed number of lions and fixed number of leopards and fixed number of tigers that are other animals that I was working with, but I was also helping the handlers and the zookeepers to work and raise lion cubs and leopard cubs, and all my thought and all my pre-existing knowledge of rescuing owls to squirrel babies to mongooses all came into the picture when I was like looking at,
Hmm.
like, I took care of two lion cubs that were orphaned, two leopard cubs, and I think I was part of that zoo community, and it was like supremely interesting, not just doing my project but also connecting with people and connecting with orphaned animals, going hands on, understanding them. Like, I was a tired mom by the end of all of it because I had two lion cubs trying to
Yes.
look for, and they're like ever hungry to feed them, and all of that, and it was overwhelming. So all of that is going on in the backdrop, but so the scientist and my professor with whom I was working for my master's project, he leads the Asian Lion project for the past like 25 years. That's like the long-term carnivore research project that he has. And this project was ongoing at the time, and I was working as part of that project, very, very focused into that captive environment working. But then I asked him that, do I get an opportunity to go out in the wild and do the project objectives if I finish my work at the zoo quickly? Then yeah, of course, go get your. So then I go out and I'm like walking around and see my first lions, and I'm like,
Mm.
all my time. So I've seen my first lions in the zoo. They're brilliant. But then when you go out in the wilderness, and this is this landscape which mimics very similar to that of the African savanna, but then there are like these patches of, like, it's a deciduous forest. It's not a grassland. So you have these patches of forest and mosaic of different habitats. It's rusty, it's brown because I was working in the winter. There's no rainfall. Winter and summer, it is hot. It's superbly hot. But then when I saw my first lion, I still remember in the wild, my professor, he was with me and he's telling me, oh, that's a mating pair. And I, for one, sitting in front of the car, could not find the male. I'm like, he's saying it's a mating pair, but I only see the lioness. First of all, it's a shock because I've never seen a one-colored, monotonal cat ever in my life. I've
Hmm.
seen striped cats and spotted cats, like big cats, and I see this like monotonal, tawny brown cat, right? And it's big, it's huge, and it also gives you it also gives you the sense of hugeness because everything else is stunted because it's like tigers, they live in these tall forests, and the size doesn't quite come out to you because the trees are so big or the grass is so, but of
Mm-hmm.
course it's a massive cat, it's much bigger than a lion. But when you see a lion, I was like, wow, that's massive. Because just the proportion of it, I'm like, wow, that but still I just couldn't go beyond the fact that I can see the male, but I can't say it because I've worked with zoo lions for a while. Like they were wild caught lions, but like I'm like, I don't know, should I tell him that I can't see the male? And just when I was about to that, like, professor, I can't see the male. Is that a male? This male just peeks behind the lioness, and they are so beautifully camouflaged. Because if you don't, I'm sure you have seen lions in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and they just blend in if it's if it's the grass is like
If they're
tawny or
laying
golden, right?
down
It just yeah,
and they're not close, don't even try.
yeah.
Like you're not
So
finding them.
so so I was like, wow. So that was my first wild lion sighting, and then I think then I spent some time like beyond my master's project to look at this, understanding what the project does, was reading up literature from the project, and there was long-term data. And then I was collecting whisker photographs, like vibrissae photographs, so that we could uniquely ID them. That's the continuous monitoring process. So we do that on foot because Asian lions are culturally different than African lions, because I keep talking to African lion biologists. Like, you don't, I'd say that we monitored them on foot, that you don't do that with African lions. They're gonna eat you. They're gonna come at you completely. So I definitely get it. So I got charged for the first time. That was the first time I got charged by a lioness. And I remember I was taking whisker photographs, and all I wanted to do was like turn and run. I was like just a master's student at the time. Never been charged by an elephant before, but never by a like large carnivore right in front. And one of my field assistants, he's been working in that project for like 20 years now. He just held my elbow and said, "Nope, whatever you do, do not run." And I'm like, what should I do? I just stood behind him and he thrashed his bamboo cane, made a lot of noise. I was just stunned, frozen. Because when a lioness or a lion charges, it's like they gallivant to you. Like they thrash their tails. There's a ball of like dust. And it's like it's just impressive and overwhelming the way they come with all that roar and everything. So I was just frozen. And I think that's after that, I didn't speak for like which was like for a while, and I remember I burst into laughter because my field assistant started laughing, and then they told me a very interesting tale. It's like, that's your first charge, that's your first time you've been attacked by a lion, either that would make you or break you.
Mm.
And I think that has resonated for the rest of my time, because I went back, wrote up my thesis, my master's thesis, done, and I walked up to my professor. I said, I have these questions, because I was finding these lines to be super interesting, because these lines, the males and females, do not stay together. And I was finding that that's like, wow, that's not a pride structure that you find or being talked about in African literature, because lions are supposed to be communal, living in prides, where you have a male coalition, you have females, and they here it's like males do their own thing, females do their own thing, females have their cubs, they hardly interact. And I'm like, wow. So I then went to my professor and said, I have these questions. Can I pursue a PhD? And he was like, well, I'm not very sure. We do have a lot of data. We can build upon it. Why don't you just take some time and go and find more of this information that you have already started collecting as your master's work? And then we can talk about it. I said, okay. So I went back to the system, did field work for a year, collected data, showed him, and said that these are the patterns that I'm getting. These lions are very different from the lions that very different from the sociobiology of lions that we know from African literature, which is like, predominantly comes from the Serengeti and Ngorongoro, which has like these supremely fantastic long-term study, say headed by like, started with Chala, then like Bertram, Princeton, and then Craig Packer at the U of M, who's a collaborator now, been working like fascinating data from those two systems. But I was finding very different lion sociobiology in this system. And that's where I started. I looked at those patterns, showed it to my professor, like, listen, these patterns are looking interesting now with that amount of data. And he's like, yeah, let's do this. And then I ended up doing a PhD on the sociobiology of males and females, looking at, male coalition structure, mating systems, and yeah, and then with that entire saga of connection with lions started, and then catching lions were the best part of it. Putting transmitters on lions and following them at night was the best part of it. I was like supremely tired, knocked out completely, because I used to always so we used to do these continuous monitoring sessions where we put a transmitter on a couple of animals in the pride or one of them, and then we used to do like a full cycle of monitoring, all behavior sampling, 24 hours a day for like 3 feeding cycles, which can be somewhere between 8 to 15 days, and like 24 hours following that entire animal or the group. So we had 2 teams. I used to always take the night shift, which is like starts at 5 in the evening, ends at 9 in the morning. But because that was the cooler part of the day, also lions were the most active. Otherwise, they just sleeping.
Yeah, what else are they going to do in that
do
heat?
anything. But at night, they're just super predators, and that gave me a lot of understanding of how lions interact with humans. And well, as much as the fun part of the science was interesting, of doing like animal behavior science, of like, understanding that male lions have hierarchies in a coalition, which African lions do not, or has not been reported. Resource sizes are small because they are feeding mostly on cheetah, which you have seen, I guess, in Nepal, a spotted deer, which is like about 75 pounds. And the dining dish is small, of course. So there is a hierarchy between males. Female pride sizes are small, somewhere between 2 to 5 females, and that's it. So the number of mating opportunities are less. So there is a hierarchy where there is a male who's dominant, who gets 70% of all the matings and 45% more food from carcasses. And then there are the subordinate, and then they're like, it's a linear hierarchy. This was not known for lions because it was mostly for canids that you have this kind of linear hierarchy. In case of lions were always known as egalitarian per se. So that, and then looked at mating strategies, which was supremely interesting because the lionesses were mating with multiple rival male coalitions, and all these male coalitions.
Really?
Yeah. So since the males do not hold female prides, they hold territories, and each of these territories, multiple female pride territories overlap, and the males are connecting with multiple female groups, and these female groups are also interacting with multiple male groups, and there is no monopoly. And the females mate with multiple male coalitions, and all of those males are absolutely convinced that the cubs are theirs. So
that's brilliant from a lioness, like cub survival.
Absolutely.
Strategy.
Because infanticide is so high in lions, and if you have a situation where the males are not like assigned to a particular pride, then you need as much protection as you want from all the males that you might come across. And that's what the lions do. They keep mating. The lionesses keep mating with different males. Pregnancy rates are as low as like 20%. So 1 in every 5 of those mating events, which are like long, 3 to 5 days of mating.
Oh, so they still do the like marathon sex runs.
Yeah, marathon.
With multiple men. Males.
So they would do 1 estrus with 1 male. Even I've seen like the female would like go half an estrus with 1 particular male, take off, and go to a rival male coalition, not the same coalition, go to another male coalition, and do that for like the next 2 days. And
while she's still in estrus.
While she's still in estrus. But mostly what the females would do is they need to come into estrus at least for like somewhere between 4 to 5 times before she gets pregnant. And all those 5 can be with 5 different coalitions, like 5 different males. of
So is
five
it
different
possible
coalitions.
for her litter to have, like, cubs from, all these different males, or is it
So
just
so
one that actually takes?
So we are at the moment assigning paternity because we just finished the coalitionary like genetics, like how the males are related between each
Mm,
other. Now we're just looking at paternity data of the cubs, and yeah, and it's totally possible that you find that in cheetahs, and I don't why it should not be in lions, but if we find that, that would be fascinating. But behaviorally, the lioness is made to like keep the males at sort of a status quo, and the males are sort of sharing the females, and all the males are convinced that the cubs are their own. So if a male
wow.
coalition has had interaction with the female pride, any of the females of that pride, and they will not kill the cubs. And the same cubs which are being tolerated by multiple male rival male coalitions at different times of the month or the day or connections. But there would be infanticide when new males, absolutely new males, come in as a
Mm.
turnover where they have no prior exposure to the females. They would just come and kill everything. So the females like keep like they convince by confusing the males about paternity, and yeah, they are super smart, and this is an adaptation of the lionesses for this particular strategy, and I think they're doing supremely well. The males have no idea, and I think that's why it's like super crucial. Been trying to always flaunt the idea that it's not the males who pull the reins, it's always the lionesses. So it's lion queens, not lion kings. Like we need to change that narrative sometime. It's like, you know, we like it's the females who are winning the battle of the sexes most of the times. And yeah, so I guess so that was fantastic to
That's
understand.
incredible. I had no idea. Like, that is just it's fucking genius, like, for these lionesses. Oh my god. I mean, if they could just know what their African cousins are having to experience as soon as a male is kicked out of their pride, essentially, then all of their cubs are destroyed. Like,
Like,
it's isn't it, like, one of the highest causes of cub
mortality.
death
Yeah.
is infanticide?
Infanticide. Yeah.
Infanticide?
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What other differences have you found? And just in general too, because I mean, not only are these lions in a completely different area, but they also look different. So how else are these lions different from their Serengeti relatives?
Tanzanian. So I think by body weight they're not different, although they look different. The males have a bit of a scrawnier mane because they don't have as much of a nice full mane as that of the Tanzanian lions or the Serengeti lions. Here the males more like have like sort of like much scrawnier mane. That's why they look a slightly smaller, but their body weights are very similar. They don't differ in their body weight. Females look up to me relatively. Asian lionesses look much sleeker with
Hmm.
their face a bit more elongated, more leopard like
Hmm.
than uh, like Serengeti lionesses, where I find them to be far more circular faces rather. But these are like more relative differences which are not very strongly connected with morphometrics. It's more like looks, but it's Asian lions do have a belly fold, which is like a fold of skin that's very visible, and I definitely believe that's sort of a founder effect where you will find that belly fold in some of the African populations, but not
Oh, really?
not everywhere. But in case of the
Hmm.
Asian lions, you'll always find it because the Asian lions comes from a very small little stock of like somewhere between 12 to 50 animals. And I think most of the founders had it. And that's why like all the population have it right now. So I think that's one of the major difference. But it's not that the African lions do not have a belly fold. It's not that they do not always have a belly fold. But in case of Asian lions, you'll always find a belly fold, like a fold of loose fold of skin right through across the belly line. And yeah, that's very distinctive. And yeah, and case of differences, I think one of the major differences that I have understood talking to like African lion biologists is that these lions are behaviorally different to in their responses or in their attitude towards humans. Because I
Mm.
think like humans have nurtured this population from like just about somewhere like a handful to where they are now. It's a steady increase, it's a conservation miracle, it's a conservation success story where lions were just found in the Gir protected forest. They are now like in a landscape of about somewhere between 15,000 to 20,000 square kilometers, of which just 1,800 square kilometers is protected. It's like, so lions literally live
Wow.
in people's backyards, and they don't live, they thrive there, right? They
Mm.
have like pride, they have like total sociobiology connected with it. And I think the number of interactions that humans and lions have, it's phenomenal, but the number of negative interactions. So, like, just to give you some stats, like I was reading and listening to one of the finest lion biologists of our age, Craig Packer's talk, and he was talking about how there's like the spread of he looked at the spread of human eating by lions and how that affects how prey densities are low and how that results lions to have strong confrontations with humans. And I was thinking about our system, the like, gear system, and we were looking at like our radio colored lions, and we found that one in every 10,000 encounters between humans and lions, when humans and lions are within visible distances, we took 30 meters to be a cutoff threshold where humans can also see them, lions can also see them. Just one out of 10,000 encounters were aggressive.
Wow.
And those aggression were just circumstantial, like they got spooked, or like there was a mating pair or females with cubs, and that's about it. And it's never like
Mm.
hardly would you find that lions are actually considering humans as potential prey. Well, there are cases of human eating associated with a drought and like a really bad case of drought, but you hardly see that. And I'll tell you a couple of stories which are like while monitoring lions at night, which was like the fun part of my work. Because I remember when like I don't know if I like we were so this was a time where I was monitoring a radio-collared lioness with her two sub-adults, and she was in a sort of a prosopis thicket. This is the agro-pastoral landscape outside the protected forest, and there are these farmlands, like open farmlands, because it's an arid system, and there is not so much water, irrigational water, so you don't have a lot of crops like across the year. And these times it's the harvest season, and people are sleeping in the field so that crop pests like wild boars or nilgai, which
Mm.
is like the largest largest antelope in the Indian subcontinent. They come and don't raid crops. But I see that this lioness was resting out in this prosopis thicket right beside the field with her two sub-adults, which are like about 2.5 years old at that time. And at 2 in the morning, this lioness walks out, comes into this open field, because they use these open fields as like, moving between these patches of prosopis and acacia, which are basically their resting sites in the day. And also they hunt in those patches. So they're moving across, and there's this lady, an old lady of the farm of the camp. She's sleeping in a charpai, a khatla, which is basically like a coir bed with wooden stands. It's outside. She's sleeping, and this lion, and I'm like sitting on the hood of the car and just watching with a night vision. And in a moonlit night, lions look like pale ghosts,
Hmm.
and it is absolutely so romantic to see them walk across an open
Oh,
landscape. So,
it
so,
sounds
so
beautiful.
yeah, so they walk across, and this lioness just walks to, and I'm like waiting with them. Like, I'm getting uneasy now because this lioness comes, sniffs at the feet of this woman sleeping,
Ugh.
and
I just got
I'm like,
goosebumps.
yeah, I'm like, oh no, what should I do? Because that lioness is radio collar. That's gonna come on me if something weird thing happens. Then the lioness just walks across, just moves nonchalantly away with her two sub-adults. That's it. The next morning, I talked to this woman, and she's like, she doesn't even know. And I'm like, look at the pug marks. It's right there beside your bed. And she smiles and said, you know what? The lions are just neighbors who just help us sleep better. Because if you have lions in and around your farm, in and around your agricultural patch, then crop pests like wild boars and nilgai do not come as frequently. So they can sleep peacefully at night. Now, which is in super
Wow.
contradiction to studies in Tanzania, which shows that bush pigs, which come to the fields to raid, make humans stay in these crop fields at night, and that's a vulnerable time, and that increases the chances of lion attacks. Whereas in this case, the lions just are like, it's very difficult to like ecologically or like really test for it. I'm trying to do it, but it's not only the people who are culturally different, but also the animals who are they're behaviorally different. The levels of tolerance towards humans are in a different league altogether. So I think it's just not the
Wow.
culture of humans, it's also the culture of animals that have led to this coexistence that we are talking about. It's not easy to live with a super predator, and which is like,
Mm-mm.
yeah, but then yeah. And since the past 10 years, lions are increasing. There are livestock depredation. They do kill livestock in these villages, and we did the maths, and we're finding that there are 100 new villages that are being added to the range of lion depredation map every year. So there are like 100 new villages that they're extending their range
Wow.
to. So,
Wow.
which is optimistic and also scary for a lion biologist or a carnivore biologist or a conservationist, because, well, you have lions in areas where they were not there for 200 years, for the past 200 years. So people really do not know how to live with a carnivore like that. And that
Right.
has some serious concerns. So there's a lot of work to do. At this moment, it's like, I think it's still going, but then it's like, yeah, it's as I would just reiterate, it's not easy to live with a large carnivore in your backyard, and when you have not lived with one for generations, where you really don't know what to do when you literally open your back door and you see there is a pride of lion sitting right there. And that's a
Yeah.
reality in the landscape
Hmm.
that I've worked so extensively in. So yeah, I guess lions are not only, their sociobiology is not only different than their Serengeti or Tanzanian counterparts, their attitude towards humans are also different.
Mm.
So yeah.
Wow. And for also more of a history lesson, what exactly happened to this particular population of lions? So, how did they get so separated from their African cousins? What occurred a couple 100 years ago for this bottleneck to happen?
So if you look at the recent genetic history of lions, so there was this huge debate that the lions that are right there in India, they were brought in as part of the trade route between Africa and India. But then the genetics, then the lions which would be towards the east of Africa, the Horn of Africa, that would be the closest relatives of lions, because if it's the trade route that's connecting Africa to India and the lions came from there, then the lions would have basically humans brought them in. That would have been the lions, like the deer lions would be closest relatives to the lions towards the Eastern Africa, Northeastern Africa, but that's not the case. The Western Africa, the Western African lions are the closest relatives of the lions, the deer lions. So the route in which it went is like the lions evolved in Africa and the northwestern lions moved through the connection. They went to Rome, Italy, came down to Turkey, went to the Middle East, then through that came all the way connected to India. And through the northwestern part of India, they came in and then they settled all across until about the central part of India, northwestern to the central part of India. We do not have very strong records of lions down south, but that was the extensive range of the Asian lions, which was still recently known as the Panthera leopersica, because its type locality was Persia. But now recently they have been changed to just two different subspecies where the Asian lions fall as Panthera leo leo, which is basically the closest relatives of the Barbary lion, which is like now extinct, but they are the oldest. So now it seems like the Asian lions are the oldest living lineage of lions in the world, because there might have
Wow.
been a backflow of lions back. A group of researchers, fantastic work, they found that the Indian wolves are the oldest lineage of wolves alive in the world. It's not
Really?
yeah, they're not the wolves that we study in Yellowstone or Voyagers. It's the wolves that in India that survived the Pleistocene, like they survived, and then there was a backflow again. Wolves evolved in North America, moved across, went extinct, and then there was a backflow of wolves from these parts of the world to like recolonize. So
So
perhaps
cool.
the lions also went through that. But so what happened in India was they went through two genetic bottlenecks. One was when the sea level rose, and basically where the lions are at this time, the peninsula, the Kathiawar Peninsula, which is like the Gujarat Peninsula, that got broken off from the mainland of India. So the lions are all across the northern India towards the eastern part of India that got disconnected. Now hunting wiped off the rest of the lions. It just got secluded to this part of the country. Their numbers also declined because of hunting. And I think the last line that was found beyond Gujarat, the state, was something around early 1800s. Since then, there were no
Wow.
lions outside of that state. But that state, because of lion hunting, lions really went down to about somewhere between that. So that was the first genetic bottleneck that happened, where the lions got restricted to one state, where the mainland population got completely disconnected and then wiped off. And then the next genetic bottleneck happened at the onset of the 19th century, where they were hunted down to the last, somewhere between 12 to 50. And the erstwhile Nawab, who was the king of Junagadh, the state where basically, which is the erstwhile district, now the district which is associated with the Gir Protected Forest, wrote a letter to the then British Viceroy, Lord Curzon, that you're welcome to come and see, but hunting will not be allowed because they're just a handful. And that's the protection that started from the Nawab. And then in independent India, the central government and the government of Gujarat did a fantastic job to protect, nurture. And since then, lions have increased since like 50 to now somewhere around 700 to 800 individuals. And it's been a steady increase. Lions have not only increased in numbers, but they have increased from like just 1,400 square kilometers to like somewhere between 15,000 to 18,000 square kilometers. So we are looking at a conservation success story, but with all success comes the problem of surplus and conflict. And that's what we discussed. So the history of lions goes back quite a bit, but I'm also totally intrigued why Sri Lanka would be uh, named. So why does it have a lion in its emblem where there were no lions beyond southern India?
Mm.
It says that Ashok, the great king Ashok, sent his son Megasthenes with a lion, because his capital was lion capital. That's what the lion chakra is on our coins, the Ashok chakra, with four lions, and it's a royal symbol. But then he sent his son to the king of Sri Lanka to spread Buddhism, because he was converted to Buddhism. He embraced Buddhism, and his son went. And apparently, he went with a gift of a live lion, and that's why it's named Sri Lanka with an emblem. But there are also different records of finding tigers there, like
On Sri
tiger
Lanka?
in Sri Lanka, like paleo records of tigers there, where you have leopards, because leopards
Right.
came in earlier before the land bridge between Sri Lanka and India broke. Tigers came much later, but
Hmm.
recent records, fossil records, show that there is a cave in Sri Lanka where they found tooth, which is closest would be a tiger. So perhaps we don't know, but so we do not have any records of lions down south. But yeah, it's still a mystery. But they were surely there from across Western India to Central India to Eastern India, parts of Eastern India. And yeah, and I think that's the history of lions, but
Mm.
that's the connection of lions with humans too.
Wow. Do you think that it was competition with tigers, or do you think just a niche filling why you don't think they moved further south?
Uh,
Or combination of both?
that you're talking about that the lions, that the tigers moved further south. Well, so lions and tigers cohabited till like pretty recently. There were
Hmm.
tigers in Gujarat. There were lions. If you read mythology, Shiv Puran per se, there are examples of records of tiger lion hybrids in the wild. So I'm definite. Absolutely,
Really?
they did have like the same range until pretty recently when they separated out. And a tiger and a lion, one to one, a lion is no match. Like, felt both of those animals worked more with lions, less with tigers, but completely that's a different beast altogether. Tigers are like a different animal altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're beautiful, scary creatures. They're amazing, but don't want to meet
Give,
one of those unexpectedly.
gives you the creeps, isn't it? It gives me the creeps completely. So, but a group of lions can be strongly over competitive, oh, like more competitive than a tiger when they're like face to face encounters. But I think it's more to do with like how habitat shrunk and they just couldn't separate. There were not enough niche available to make those segregations per se. And I think they just got moved out. They just separated out. And I think more of the lions got extinct, locally extinct in the other parts of the country. It's more primarily because of hunting, because they were rarer than tigers. So of course they were far better bounty, a far more
Hmm.
feeling of pride, which brings us to that.
The bigger trophy.
They are bigger trophy, different looking trophy, the machoistic ego, because you kill a male lion and it's like connected with patriarchy all through, right? You're talking
Hmm.
about a male which wears a crown of man and it's bigger and then the females, and it's sort of, yeah, associated with a lot of male ego. So that, and it's a matter of pride, and that's very, very ironic that a group of lions is called a pride because it's all associated with that sort of, connection with human psyche, like how they looked at lions per se. But bringing the story back, is the lions were wiped off outside of this particular state because of severe hunting, and tigers just could take that pressure because there were more tigers than lions. So well, the tiger numbers also dwindled to about 1411 in 2005, 6, and then since then have come back to about 3000 now. Yeah, so it's more to do with, yeah, of course, competition, because you're right, the amount of protected forest reduced, humans increased, and agriculture changed. Colonialism changed the entire topography of the country,
Hmm.
not only just hunting but also changing these landscapes into like major tree felling, and forests were opened up, the railroads came in. So yeah.
Was it mostly British hunting the lions, or yeah?
And also, it's not only the British, because the kings, the erstwhile kings, were also
Mm.
facilitating, but
So the
mostly
royal.
the royals. Yeah, the royals were hunting because it was royal trophy, it was royal game per se, and yeah, it was like tiger hunting was like absolutely thrilling. I understand, but people going out for hunting lions, which are rarer, this gives you a different. And like, I'm sure they gave them a different kind of a thrill, which is basically what also is the baseline for trophy hunting per se. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. Well, luckily, all of that's in the past now.
yeah,
And this has become, like you said, 15 to 20 individuals now estimated around 700. That's phenomenal. And we're not talking about like 300 years. This has been in recent time
yeah,
that this success has happened. And now, like you said, the pendulum is starting to swing in the other direction, where it's like, we've almost done our job too well.
yeah.
Now what do we do? So let's go to that. What are some of the big problems that you're now experiencing having a thriving lion population? What are some of the biggest issues? What's the conflict? And how do we mitigate it? Or what are some things that are being tried to help with this now new great but not good problem?
Well, that's a very interesting thing to dive in, because now we are dealing with the problem of success, and it's not just the lions; it's a lot of other carnivores, elephants as well, because we've done mighty well since the Wildlife Protection Act came in, and we've done really well in bringing populations back. And now it's not just it's not just the protected forests that are holding our major carnivore or like elephant or populations or wildlife population. They're moving out, and there are no borders for wildlife, and our protected forests are not so big that you can, keep them fenced and also have a viable population. You need to have
Mm,
those connectivities, you need to have those buffers, you need to have those percolations. We do not have a Serengeti, we do not have a Kruger, we do not have a Yellowstone. Our protected forests in India are somewhere between, the average is about 250 square kilometers. You fence them, and that would be the doom for animals inside, because they're not, we're talking about tigers and lions and elephants. They need space, right?
yeah.
So if we are doing that, it's gonna be, then we have to artificially move animals back and forth, and that's like a complete mess. So we are not there yet. Like perhaps we're gonna move towards that, but like the African game reserves do, that move animals between so nicely, and so they've mainstreamed it so well. But let's be honest, we do not have a Serengeti, we do not have a Kruger. So fencing can, you can only deal with a little bit of fencing where like humans and animals are like exactly at odds. You can fence a part of it, but you cannot fence an entire park.
Mm,
That would be detrimental to the biota, which needs, sourcing dynamics to live in that landscape. So what we are dealing right now, as I said, is that the lions literally in people's backyards, and that's where they live. Like there are lions inside the protected forest, but one third, and more, increasingly more animals are living outside the protected forest in people's backyards. So what's the major problems is that, you know they feed on livestock, right? They are killing livestock. And as I said, the population and the lions thrived in this landscape because Gujarat is a non-beefitarian state. There is an anti-beefitarian sentiment, but they drink a lot of milk because cow is holy, cattle is holy, and they drink a lot of milk. What happens to like old cattle when they grow beyond the milk period, when they become non-productive? They're just left on the streets, alleys. They're moving into pastures. They go into these cattle camps where they are kept, given some primary care and food, water, but they die because they're old, they're vulnerable, and they die, and they're dumped in the landscape. And the lions
mm.
get a bounty of free food. And when you give cats free food, they breed like rabbits. And I'm just, this is an analogy. They don't breed like rabbits, but they do breed fast. Like, they have quick turnovers of litters. Females come into estrus much faster than they
Mm.
would when they have dependent young. So females, lionesses will not come into estrus for about a year and a half if they have young. But I have seen lionesses in this landscape, in the outer protected area landscape, coming into estrus in like 8 months, because
That's
there's so much,
insane.
there's so much of food, right? There's so much
They've
of
had this
food.
like weaned off the babies at 8 months.
Yeah.
Like
So
it's
they
so young.
so they're like, so they cycle, they just keep reproducing fast, they recruit fast. And now with this nice level of food bounty or subsidy, we have reached in a scenario where lions are just, there are a lot of lions, and these lions are not just feeding on the carcasses, they are depredating livestock. And our estimate suggests, shows that there are like 100 new villages that are being added, as I just said, added to the map, where lions are making livestock kills every year. 100 new villages, and these new villages, most of them have no living memory of living with a large carnivore, right? So we are talking about a state where per capita income is still higher than most part of the country. So they're
Hmm.
still taking it, and they are mostly feeding on, their herding practices make them mostly kill non-prized or like low expense livestock. The
Hmm.
forest department provides a very quick compensation, and I believe there's no end to compensation. You have to be prompt, you have to make it, and you have to revise your market, like your compensation prices, very quickly, because then the social carrying capacity can be increased. But I don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 years where lions are reaching like suburbs and cities. It's a tough time right now. So I think education, sensitization, or providing people with the economic benefits of living with lions. It's not just lions keeping crop pests away, but you have to bring those, like, out of the box thoughts of, like, if people have lions in their farmlands, somewhere down the line regulate tourism, give them the right of showing them to tourists, regulate it, and show them, because they can bring a lot of money. They need to have an economic incentive of having lions in their private landscapes. If they don't get money, as I think Craig Packer very strongly mentions about, like, wildlife have to pay their way through. And I think lions have to pay their way through in this landscape. And only then can you have, like, people and lions living in these landscapes. Otherwise, if people find no economic incentives, they're going to change those landscapes into lion unfriendly landscapes. There are like Prosopis and Acacia patches, they would be changed into, like, built ups and concrete. And it's changing fast. I've been working there for like what, 10 years now, and it has changed way more than what I was like. I'm like, wow. So I think that economic incentive has to be brought in, but we have to think about an alternative. We have to. Otherwise, this population of lions is not going down. Like, what do we do with this entire interface is something that I struggle every day. Like, what do you do? Where, other than maybe perhaps teach people, like, this is how you live with large carnivores, but then you cannot teach that to city dwellers. You can't teach that to, like, lions on paved roads. It's like a ticking time bomb.
Mm.
And we have provided some strategies that if you still want to have lions in the landscape, you have to have those. So we found through telemetry that 4 square kilometers of sacrosanct patch, which is like undisturbed habitat outside the protected forest, is crucial for the females to, like, litter, to give birth and rear their young. So if we really want lions in that landscape to be feasible in the outer protected area landscape, we have to prioritize those habitat patches which are greater than 4 square kilometers, and safeguard them, or make them as sort of some levels of protection, make it as community reserves, or, like, conservation reserves, give it to the communities to safeguard them. And at least that way it will not change into perhaps concrete, or perhaps into like agricultural fields. You have to keep them. So it's that mosaic, that's fine balance, which is, I don't know if it's enough, but I definitely believe that you have to find, or we have to find a very immediate, like an immediate solution, in a way where people benefit for having those dangerous carnivores in their backyard. Like, it has to be economics. Like, people have to find money out of it. So I'll be honest about it. People do these illegal lion shows where people show lions in their private property, because lions are everywhere, and people take an exorbitant amount of money, because why not? You get to see lions up close and personal, sitting in your car and watching them. You don't have to even give the park fees and stuff, which is like the wildlife tourism, the legal tourism. But now it's happening illegally. You shut them down, people will completely be alienated, and they will turn those at least lion friendly habitat patches into something more unfriendly. So why not Like it's happening. So why not regulate it so that the lions are not harassed? People are doing things at a safe distance, and it's a win-win situation. But I don't know if that's, I don't think there is a silver bullet. So there's a lot of associated nuances, and I think if we really want to safeguard lions outside the protected forest in that matrix, we really need to work really fast to stop or to think about like lion friendly development rather than like bringing concrete out of it. So yeah, that's something that needs to be done. But I don't know if that would be enough or not. Like often a lot of us think about that whether the lions outside in these patches are doomed, because we don't know if that patch would be there in the next 5 years because it's a private property. Somebody would like to make a hotel or a building in it, and that's it. The pride that uses it as its major, habitat source, or basically it's their respite, will have to be displaced, and they don't have another place. So yeah. So to be honest, I dabbled with a lot of solutions, but I really do not have a strong solution because I don't know. It's just kind of crazy.
You're in uncharted territory right
Yeah,
now, which is both exciting and it's super scary. I mean, at the
yeah,
same time. And all the reasons why you just said, and anybody's been listening to this podcast for a while will know that I'm in conservation travel for exactly the reason you just said. The exact reason. Because the world revolves around money. And just like you said, and I'm currently reading a book as well. And that's one of the things that is said. It's just it's almost a sentiment now, which it really is true, and it's the perfect way to say it, that wildlife needs to pay to stay. Like,
exactly. What pays stays.
yeah, and it's very true. And how do you get wildlife to pay? Well, you bring in people who actually want to see it.
Oh,
And then their tourist dollars are then funded into the local community, especially if it's set up correctly and properly and sustainably,
yeah,
then everybody benefits. Everybody in that area benefits. I mean, there is a lot of corrupt areas, and yeah, there is, it's like you said, it's not a silver bullet because it's not properly ran in a lot of places of the world. But where it is, God, it's such a strong conservation tool. Again, when it's partnered with great regulations, great tourism structure, places where people can actually stay, eat healthily, have clean water, and then also have the protected areas as well. So that's all in conjunction. Yeah, you can't just have tourism. You have to have all of these things in combined. But when they're all together, God, that's why the Serengeti's still here. That is why so many species are still here, is simply because all of these things were in place and they bring in
absolutely.
a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we are thinking about these desperate questions, because times are desperate, we're talking about large carnivore increase and coexistence. We need to be very bold in our management strategies. It cannot be just copybook anymore. Yes, it's
Right.
a bold step. Yes, it's not the knee-jerk response that you have. But if you do not have these out-of-the-box ideas, then perhaps it would be too late. And you just cannot, it's that time is gone that you can safeguard species only in protected forests. I'm not
Right.
undermining protected forests. It's crucial, absolutely crucial, but we have moved on beyond that paradigm completely. And these
Yeah.
are thoughts, as you just mentioned. If it pays, it stays. It has to pay. And if it pays properly, done properly with proper enforcements and proper, with all that you said, yes, probably, perhaps like 10, 20 years down the line, it would be a thriving possibility of, it's a win-win situation for both species, or like both communities, wildlife and humans.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just reminds me if when I was in outside of Chitwan, in the Bagmara Community Forest, I mean, that was one of the best examples I've ever experienced in my life of a properly ran community forest where the community ran the ecotourism in their forest. And because of that, it was thriving. They had gharial and tiger and
Exactly.
rhino, all these species that are outside of the park and the buffer zone in their community forest. And it was amazing. And I was walking around with the president of the community forest, and he was just explaining, he's like, none of this was here. All of the jungle I saw, everything. He's like, 20 years ago, this was a field. And I'm looking at this pristine, these trees that are several feet high, these beautiful watering holes that they've put in for the gharials to thrive and the rhinos to come in. And I was just blown away. I was blown away. I'm like, this is a proper community forest. And it was 100% ran by the community. And just if just if that idea could like spread more. But again, this was outside of a national park. So it's the national park, the buffer zone, and then the community forest. So a whole different idea, which I know there's some things in Namibia, which I experienced of these like community forest or conservation area ideas where it's ran by the community. Yeah, I of course, every single community economy is different, culture is different. So don't know how at all what it would look like there, but that's a possibility too, where it would be a community ran thing and everybody would have a say on how these lions are managed, how the wildlife is managed, and how the tourism is managed in the area.
And I think that's the most inclusive way of going forward. Because I
Mhm.
think if we are talking about animals in community lands, like that brings to the question, who owns wildlife? Like if it's not the people who share space and take the brunt of living with those animals, like you have to trust them. Of course, it's not blind trust. You're talking about like the nuances, putting it out there with some sort of enforcement legalities associated, but then you have to put it out there. Otherwise, what's the community's benefit of living with such
Right.
a dangerous species right in their backyards? You have to also understand that you cannot just like bark upon religious and sociocultural tolerance for so long,
Especially as
right?
religion's going down around the world. All
and and
religions are
and
going down.
exactly, and with as time changes, we are looking at a shift in tolerance. We have estimated it as people who are like in their 80s or beyond, like in their 60s or 70s or 80s, they are far more tolerant towards animals than younger generations, because it's just a different change, and that change is gonna just increase manifold. So if there's no incentive, then what's the point? And if you
Yeah,
don't give it, then I don't think that we really have a choice. So
right.
that's the way to go, I guess. And I believe it can work given the sort of history that we have, given the sort of that connection that humans have with wildlife. I think we can make it work if we have a proper plan in place, and it's like a strong step that we can take. But yeah, that would be quite, it's a socio-political will, and yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, yeah. It was just God, it was just so fucking phenomenal. Like just experiencing it myself and seeing it in person because all of the tourism that was there. I mean, the president like he took us to these places like these it's still very much caste. There's still definitely like different, levels of society and like the people who are on the bottom, which I guess were like more of this like tribal group.
Hmm.
I mean, there was so much development that they were able to do for these people, all because of tourism, all because of what the community forest was able to bring in together, and that money was directly for them, and then they're incentivized to not harm any of the wildlife because a lot of that group is subject to, the more subsistence harvesting. And so
Yep.
they are the ones that are going to be most directly in conflict with a lot of this dangerous wildlife. So there are examples. It's just, again, how do you take that model and put it somewhere else? Because that exact model you can't replicate anywhere else
Absolutely.
because
It's
all
site
of the
specific.
factors are so different.
Exactly. Site specific. Even what they're doing with snow leopards in the mountains, like where people were like herd, they were killing snow leopards. Now they're showing snow leopards to tourists because now they know that a snow leopard alive is much more money than a snow leopard dead.
Hmm.
And it's as simple as it brought down to that economics. But there are also finer nuances to it. But yeah, I think economics is a strong driver of coexistence for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this is still in the same plane of this conversation, and one that I'm excited to dive into this next one. So when we were chatting the other day, you had mentioned that there was talk of moving a population or like a group of these lions to a different area. And I would love to start to dive into that. So, where were they supposed to go? Why are they not there yet? And then also, let's get into this possible other species that might be coming in too, which is a big talk. And some people listening might not have heard about this yet because it's not that well known, but holy shit. So, let's go. So, what is this park? What is this area? What's going on with these lions? Why have they not moved?
So as we have just talked through, and pretty much we've established that they're the only population of Asian lions in the world. That's like the global population. It's a small population which has increased. But then, as any small population or any restricted population is at a threat, is that they can be wiped off in any like epidemic or like in a flood or an earthquake. So you don't keep all the eggs in the same basket. That's like the last thing that you do. So there had been a lot of scientific and political conversations and directed thoughts, meetings, ideas, research, where it started way back in the early 1990s. And since then, like it has been very well established that we need a second population of Asian lions. So that it's like sort of an insurance population. So that if something happens to this, then we still have a stock of wild lions. And so since then, the sites were selected, and Kuno Palpur, which is like a protected area in Madhya Pradesh in central India, that's like the neighboring state, and it had lions formerly. Now there are only leopards. There is a transient tiger once a while. So that was selected, and it's a beautiful forest, very similar to the forest where lions are right at the time, at
Mm,
this point, like the Gir forest, very similar. So with all that work, with all that research, with all those technicalities, reports, everything, so finally the central government started moving on this. So they started the voluntary relocation of people from inside Kuno to moving them outside so that they could bring the protected forest back into a sort of a level where they could host lions, because bringing lions, they need inviolate space. They would need some sort of inviolate space when you're thinking about a wild population of lions. So that was done, and that happened. That was the people were moved out, and the park was started getting ready with restocking, and like prey numbers increased really nicely. And then with all of that leading to one after the other, so I was at that time doing my master's and was slowly getting into the lion picture. And I remember in 2013, when I was finishing my master's work, the Supreme Court of our country, which is like the highest court of law in the country, passed like a phenomenal judgment. It's like one of the most exquisite, most extraordinary judgments that can come in a country where people want development and people want like more space. So what it said in the crux was that we need to be more ecocentric than anthropocentric when we are talking about species like lions and species that like wildlife, which are property of the country, not property of any particular group, state, or any place. And lions to be moved with immediate effect. And immediate effect meant 6 months. And that was 2013 March. This 2021, no lions have moved. And it's primarily because there's a political deadlock and people love the lions there. And that's one of the major reasons why lions have increased from that tiny number to where it is. But people love lions, and it's just that if you start moving lions from that place to another, they would lose their monopoly, because they are the
mm,
only place where you find Asian lions in the entire globe. And that's like an absolutely different paradigm. So people are attached so much to lions, which are actually helped lions to increase in that state of Gujarat, now they are not ready to part with lions. And so it's like a series of political deadlocks, meetings after meetings. I served in a few of those meetings, served in those committees, wrote reports. So lions have not moved. Um, lions have not moved. So, but the place is ready. Now, lions have not moved. Of course, the people who are associated with that place, the staff, the forest department, they're losing their morale because, let's be honest, you need something charismatic to be connected with, which is supremely unfortunate that we, as a professional, value judgment. Like, charismatic species concept is sort of a dodgy concept for me, because as soon as you put that, a good looking or a charismatic or a species, then you are sort of undermining other species completely. So why can't we, quote unquote, sell frogs and toads as much as we can sell lions and tigers, or leopards per se? So I guess that charisma holds, and we cannot go beyond it right at this time. So people are losing their morale there because they're no big carnivore except the leopard, which is all there, and protection regimes have gone down. So the park, it can snowball or just cascade back to being, like, it's the protection regime, and the biodiversity values can go down just because that level of morale, high protection are just not there, because they're not seeing any movement or any green signal for the lions to come in. So, but now what's happening is that in that same place now, the Indian government is very keen to bring the cheetah, because that's the only species of carnivore that we have lost. And they're like, the Indian government is in full steam to bring the cheetah. And the cheetah, since the Asian cheetah, we do not have the Asiatic cheetah anymore. Like, they are not there in India. There are a handful of cheetahs in Iran, and they're like about 30 to 40 cheetahs, I guess. Still the population, and that's not enough to provide a stock of cheetahs for reintroduction or introduction per se. So they're getting South African cheetahs. That's the story. They're getting South African cheetahs, and yeah, so that would be the place where cheetahs are gonna come. So we're moved from lions to now bringing an absolutely different predator, and hopefully, I just hope that it's cheetahs and lions, and not just cheetahs or lions. And I believe in the scientist, the group of scientists who's leading this project, and like, they're the best that you can ask for. But it's like there's a lot of political nuances here,
Yeah.
and I just hope that someday the lions also get a second home, because it's necessary. Cheetahs, absolutely. Like, I don't like, yeah, cheetahs, we've lost cheetahs. I've never seen cheetahs in India. We are at a stage where we can bring an extinct cat back. We are not an economically impoverished country anymore. Africa does it. We can do it. But all I'm trying to say is that get the cheetah and get the lions, and make that enough space where they can have their niche separated out, so that there is no competition, because we all know when lions and cheetahs compete, what happens. So we have
Right.
to we have to have those. But I definitely strongly believe in the group of scientists who are leading the comeback of the cheetah project. And hopefully, if you ask me for a value judgment, well, I would love to see the cheetah in there, because who doesn't want to see the cheetah? But all the political nuances and conservation chronicles, well, we'll see how it plays out. But it is exciting. It is a lot of work. It is equally scary, but I also hope that the political deadlock on the lions end, and we can have a second home for lions as well. So it's like lions and cheetahs. So that should be the motto, and I hope that the Indian government and the the bureaucratic machinery can think about moving forward with that goal, and not just one over the other.
Oh my God, if that happens, I'm gonna lose my mind. Like, I'm gonna be on a plane so fast. Like, you're gonna be greeting me
Yes, absolutely.
somewhere,
Yeah,
somewhere in India, be like, oh my God, Stotra, let's go.
yeah,
Let's go see all of the cats. I mean,
yeah,
literally, like, oh my God, to
yeah.
go see cheetah, Asiatic lions, then go somewhere in central India somewhere for tigers. And then, of course, leopards are throughout that entire range as well. And to go spend some time in the Himalayas to see snow leopards,
You got it.
I might die.
Yeah, me too. I might die too. Like, so yeah, I guess it would be a very strong economic and tourism
It
boost
would
as
be
well.
huge,
Yeah,
huge.
it
I
would be
mean,
huge.
tigers already bring so much money in for India. I can only imagine. Because I mean, snow leopard tourism has definitely increased.
A
It's way
lot.
more of a time commitment, of course,
Yeah,
because nature of those cats.
yeah,
But man,
yeah.
that would be so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. But yeah, so that's the political scenario with the lion reintroduction. And sometimes it's frustrating for a conservationist to look at that,
Mhm.
and I'm sure I just joined to this bandwagon very, very recently, like 10 years ago. But there are people who have been working on this for so long, but still the lions have not moved. So I hope the cheetah paves the way of more of these, like, bold actions. Like, yes, we need to do this. We have to move the lions to somewhere else because that's what the best thing to do, right? Absolutely the correct thing to do ecologically, and from the point of view of the species per se. So yeah.
Wow. God. Oh, that'll be amazing. We'll just have to see what happens. I'll have to wait it
Yeah,
out. You have to keep me updated. Just
yeah,
like text me, be like, "Brooke,
yeah,
here's the latest update." I'd be like, okay,
yeah, let's
give
do
it to
that.
me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Am I buying a ticket yet or not?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
or just keep me posted.
yeah,
Am I just coming to go see
absolutely.
you in Minnesota or are we getting a plane?
Yeah, we just take a plane from Minnesota and just go. Like, boom, let's do this.
Yeah. I have a great international airport here. Where am I meeting you?
Yeah,
Like,
just like, boom, let's do this. Yeah, absolutely,
yeah.
Brooke. We should do that. At least go see the lions.
Oh my god, yeah, please. Please.
Yeah,
That would be incredible.
yeah,
Yeah, because then also too, because that's close enough to go and like attach it with like a snow leopard trip because I
yeah.
have not seen them yet. And that needs to happen.
But that needs to happen. Snow leopards. Oh,
Yeah.
they're just a different. Oh, they're just so so beautiful. But
Have you
yeah.
seen one? Like, have you gone on a trek or anything?
I've only seen them in captivity. No, not yet.
Mm,
So my PhD mentor, my PhD professor, he started working with snow leopards, and he's radio collared a few, and he's been promising me that next time you come, we go to the mountains and we track snow leopards. And since then it's been COVID and restrictions, and
mm.
I just want to be there. I have not seen the lions for so long because it's been so long that I've
Yes.
seen the lions, and I'm like, I don't even know how would I react when I see the lions. It might be for like just the feeling of the first rush that I had when I saw them for the first time. But yeah, let's see. But it's
Mm.
definitely something. But I believe that as you like definitely mentioned that working with these severely charismatic carnivores or species are also very politically charged. And as researchers, we are quote unquote at the mercy of a lot of funding, a lot of logistics. And it's not just like, as I said, the political scenario of moving lines, it's not just science that the lines are moving or not moving. It's like socio-political connect. And let's be honest, conservation a political, is a socio-political will. And why not? Why not? And it should be that way. But as a researcher, when I think about it, like, you it's easier to get funding when you're working with charismatic species like lions and tigers, but it also comes with its cons. It also comes with the different other side, because then you're also treading your path of thinking what might your science lead to, whether if you're gonna say this, whether you lose your right to work more, or if you say this, would that be the doom for the species per se. Like if wolves have an effect on deer, like I'm working with my collaborators are looking at like wolves and deer interactions, like wolves having an effect on deer that reduces deer hunting by people, they will not take that well, and they will gonna go out for the wolves. So every time you're working with these kinds of politically charged species, it can be quite tough and challenging just because you don't know what you should place out there. As a conservationist, as a researcher, science is something that you cannot compromise with, and that's what I have tried to and I've been taught to. Again, you say the right things out there, then you perhaps will not be working with that species for a while again because it's politically charged and people might not want to listen to those views. So, yeah, those perils are always there. I'm sure if somebody who works with reptiles and amphibians are like these are not challenges enough. Sure, their challenges are different. It's difficult to find money. It's difficult to find money for us too, but perhaps it's relatively easier to find pots of money because charismatic species do attract funding. But the other side is also kind of a bit of a challenging where primary, like I know firsthand, I know people who have lost their permits just because they spoke out from science the unpleasant truths, or basically truths that were unpleasant to people, communities, or administrators, or the system, and then you just end up not having the right to work later, or just things get constrained. So I think, you just keep it's just sort of a balance that you paddle through, and it's challenging, it's exciting, and it's fun, and sometimes superbly frustrating. And
I can only imagine.
to wake up and tell myself that that's the core crux of sometimes I teach my students is like doing conservation is a frustrating affair. You're gonna lose much more times than you're gonna win, but when you win, it's gonna stick with you for the rest of your life. So a student of mine asked me, why do it if it's so frustrating? I said, if you don't, then the result will always be zero. But if you do it, then perhaps it might be a one. So just keep banging on those doors until they break. Most of them will not, but then that does not stop us. Like if people would have thought differently, then there would not be like the Californian condors left, or
right.
So I think doing conservation is supremely frustrating. So you cannot let go of optimism at all. So
that is a great mindset. But especially since you have such firsthand experience, because it sounds like that's probably one of the biggest. Because you've listened to the podcast as well, and I always love to ask, what are some of the biggest struggles that you've had to overcome? And it sounds like that is a really big one that you have dealt with and might even still be dealing with and might deal with in the future, as long as you continue to work with these animals.
Absolutely. You cannot go about, or circumvent the fact that they are politically charged species. People connect with them differently. It can go both ways. Like, lions killing livestock, lions killing humans. It can go from like really good to it can go south really fast, or being dubbed as researchers who are trying to move lions from the state to another state. You become the villain overnight. So, where do you stand? Where do you think your research stands? Or you call out on these are things that might be causing problems to an absolutely good system. Or these are well-intended interventions, but they might be much more counterproductive than they are being productive. You call them out, you call those thoughts out as a scientist, and then you just lose out on being or doing future research. And I think you would get similar stories from most people who work in similar on similar species or similar
Mm,
landscapes, which are like superbly politically charged or politically socio-politically sort of connected, and though that those perils come with the parks. So
right. I can only imagine what every single wolf researcher right now in the northern United States feels like. I'm sure that they vibe real hard with that. Can't even imagine. Unless the few that are they're like, and yay, we're in Colorado and everything's going okay here.
yeah,
Finally. And everyone's like, oh, everybody's shooting our wolves. I can only fathom. I can
yeah,
only fathom.
absolutely. Yeah, it's, I guess, as I said, you have to make do with a lot of those losses and a lot of those weird decisions that you don't stand by, and you have to like clench your jaw so strong that it hurts in the morning. But then again, you go out and listen to a wolf, like a pack of wolves howling in the distance, or a lion roaring resoundingly to the red dawn, or you just look at like dewdrops on a spider web caught in the morning sun rays, and then you say that it's worth fighting. That's all that matters, I guess. So
Yeah,
yeah,
could not agree more.
yeah.
Oh, I have taken up so much of your time and it's been absolutely phenomenal. But I did want to ask this one last thing. Since you have a platform right now and you can share whatever message you want, is there a particular thing that you would like to say to anybody listening, a message or a piece of advice or takeaway that if anybody could take away just one thing, what would you want to make sure they did?
As I think I'll reiterate what I just keep telling my conservation course is that if you are really passionate about doing conservation, you're gonna lose more than you're gonna win. But that's why it's so crucial to embrace those wins and just get on with it and like push forward. Because if you lose hope, the community, the whole community of species as well as humans who are looking up to you, where you are the voice for them, loses all their hopes. So it's super crucial that you hold on to your beliefs and please do not do conservation research, conservation science, or conservation in containment. Make connections, connect with people, because that world has changed where one person, of course, one person can make a difference. And I don't think that we do live in that world anymore. You have to make
Mhm.
those connections. You have to make fruitful connections to move forward. And I think just put yourself out there, make that group where you can have those uncomfortable discussions so that you can carry forward what's crucial for the years to come. Otherwise, I don't see a chance for our planet. I don't see a chance for conservation or wildlife. If you're not making those meaningful connections, there's no possibilities. So, and the pandemic has taught us that severely and very difficult in a very difficult way. So just hold on to your passion and do whatever you can. Like, be a vet tech, or do tiny small little things. Go talk to school kids, or do anything. You don't have to do like a walking, talking, like a conservation research. You don't have to, just do your thing. Talk to your family that like reduce palm oil consumption, save the orangutans back in Borneo, and yeah, and make those connections. Just talk to people and make those fruitful connections where you can bank upon. And I hope, I'll just end with optimism that there is a lot left and there's a lot we can do. And I think we definitely can if we are holding on to those meaningful connections. Yep.
Ah, so good. I cannot agree more with all of that. I'm all about connecting.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely. And I
fine
think
though.
that's why what you do is so inspirational, because you're connecting people and you're making that group where they can share thoughts and ideas to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you agree. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, like they really want to learn more, maybe about the lions or maybe about what you're teaching, or they just want to chat for whatever, how can someone get in touch with you?
They can email me for sure. I am faculty Macalester College. You can find me there at the Bio ES department. So my email address is schakrab, which is like SCHAKRAB at Macalester, which is spelled as MACALESTER and you can reach out to me on that email address and I would be happy to. I'm pretty active on Twitter with my name, and so just hit me up on Twitter if you're looking for updates of what's happening in my life and what's happening in my courses and what I've been working on currently. And yeah, so that would be I would be really ecstatic to answer any questions or anything that I might be helpful about. So yeah.
Well, awesome, Stotra. This has been amazing. I cannot wait to share this with everybody.
Thank you, Brooke. And I'm really, really grateful that you invited me on this show. And it's been fantastic chatting with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks again for listening to this episode of Rewildology. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button to never miss a future episode. Do you have a cool environmental organization, travel story, or research that you'd like to share? Let me know at rewildology.com. Until next time, friends, together we will rewild the planet.